I want to be where Liz is.
Donna's raised her hand.
Oh, Donna's in San Francisco. Oh, look at that Golden Gate Bridge.
Oh, Vinny, I like your new backdrop. What's that all about?
I'm in Cape Cod right now, so I wish this
Ooh,
was
your summer house.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was so
It's
swanky.
funny. Your summer house.
Okay, guys, you can start.
Do I have a quorum here? 1, 2, 3, 4. We're waiting for Mike, right?
5.
Donna dropped off just now. She must be having technical difficulties.
Where's our consulting engineer?
Yeah, he's key to this meeting to be able to do the presentation.
Who is it?
Did you send him a thing? Because he wanted to know if he sent him a thing this morning.
Mr. Jacquemart from BFJ and Jonathan Martin. It could be one or the other.
Yeah, I have him. I'm going to promote him to a panelist once he gets on.
Okay.
I sent
I'm
it to
waiting
him
for-
this morning.
Yes,
Waiting for
thank you.
Donna and Mike.
I am definitely not an architect because these are so interesting to read.
We'll have it explained to us. No worries.
How does Nicole hair look so fabulous when you're on the beach?
Good morning.
There he is. Good morning.
Good morning.
Here comes Donna
I'm Mike.
and Mr. There we go.
There's Donna. Okay, I think everyone's present. So is there a motion to reopen the public hearing concerning the application of 115 Broadway, Cabrini? Trustee Sullivan, second. Trustee Nell, all in favor? Okay, the public hearing is now open. Just so we can get some background, Laura Lee, can you just fill us in on what's happened since we've last met?
Sure. If you recall at your last public hearing, there was some discussion about alternative locations, and there was some conversations between the parties and their consultants. And we've provided a pause period to this date certain today to see if the consultants would be interested, if the applicant would be interested in having the consultant speak to perhaps come up with a plan that reflects both sides of the equation at this point. We have received from the parties, both consultants, with the approval of the applicant, a proposed alternative that makes some changes to the design and some location and some site elements. So we have Mr. Jacquemart here with us today from BFJ. Perhaps he can walk you through where the plan, the concept plan design now stands, and to see if perhaps this can assist with both parties moving forward with an approval in some fashion.
Thank you, Laura Lee. Mr. Jacquemart, thank you for being here. Can you shed light on what's happened over the last 2 weeks?
Yes. So basically, after our last public hearing, The applicant's engineer came back and had a drawing, showed a drawing where instead of 25 parking spaces in that area in the southeast corner, they had 22 spaces, and they found another 3 spaces in the southerly lot, where the 2 spaces near loading area, another space just by extending the row of parking that's near at the southerly boundary. We then challenged that to some degree. We basically wanted them to look again at those locations that we suggested as alternatives, primarily along the driveway that leads from Broadway to the northerly parking lot. And their response is that for them, and especially for the residents that have rooms that look out on that area, they felt it was very critical, very important for the elderly residents looking out, not to change that kind of view and introduce cars in that area. We, and I have to say, under the kind of what I say shadow of RLUIPA, the federal act that regulates religious institutions, and this institution, I think, falls into that. We kind of accepted that as a compromise. And we say that, based on experience that we had in the village of Mamaroneck, where we, very complicated situation, but the end result was that the village taxpayer had to pay, I think it was more than $3 million to settle that kind of lawsuit, including the payment of the applicant's attorney's fees. So it's a very, very tricky, difficult situation that I must say, we took that into consideration. And basically then we suggested to gain another 4 parking spaces by restriping the 4 larger rows of parking, 1 in the south lot and 3 in the north lot, where by striping the parking stalls to 8.5 feet instead of 9 feet, we get 4 more spaces just by restriping. That kind of change would need the approval from the Board of Trustees, because your current code allows 8.5 spaces for residential parking, but not for commercial parking. We typically recommend that for long-term parking, that the parking stalls be 8.5 instead of 9. So for instance, in office buildings, we, as I would call that best practice in parking. So I feel that's a good solution. It's, gaining 4 spaces just by restriping, repainting. So that then brought the parking count for that new lot from 22 to 18. And then the other thing that we recommended, I don't know if you remember, if you look at their design that they proposed, they had a lot that was fairly wide, and they wanted to provide a 25-foot radius for cars that enter the lot so that they could make a U-turn, if and when the lot was full. One of the disadvantages of this particular design is that we call it a dead-end parking aisle, so that you have to make an arrangement that if that lot is full, a car drives in there, can then make a U-turn or a K-turn. So we suggested a K-turn instead of the U-turn, which basically would narrow that and apply so one of the parking spaces would say, do not park here. The cars could move in there and back out, to make the turnaround. They still wanted to maintain the U-turn. So they came up with a design that does narrow the parking aisle. So instead of having a kind of very wide paved area with a 42 diameter in the middle, they shrank it to a typical design where you have 2 parking aisles and the driveway is 24 feet wide, which is standard width for that. And so it is narrow. So the end result, the compromise, and it is a compromise, is a parking lot in that area that has only 18 spaces instead of 25 and is narrower. So visually it's more compact than what they had before. Before it was relatively wide paved area. Now that has been reduced. So that's the compromise design that they sent us on Friday. And I think they're going to present it to you, assuming that you open the hearing to the applicant. Let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jacquemart. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a question. I understand that, okay, so they get the 25 spaces that they wanted. Have you discussed with them, or can we somehow, though we can't enforce it, but a transit demand management program, which really has not been totally addressed? I know you've given significant amount of suggestions for it, but I haven't heard any replies from the applicant about a TDM program that would be introduced to reduce the amount of cars coming into the facility.
Yeah, it's to do that. You probably saw their response, about geocoding that we suggested. We don't know to what degree the TDM works, and one way to evaluate that would be to geocode it, to see a map, to see where their employees are living, how many live nearby to each other, and how many live relatively far away. People are not likely to carpool if the distances are very short, because the difficulty of scheduling and so on are not worthwhile. But if you have people that live further out, it becomes a little bit more effective. So they did not want to go that direction because it would take more time, and it's uncertain that the result is such that you would have enough people that want to carpool. It is not an ideal kind of place where people would carpool because of their schedules. They have 3 shifts and so on. So it's not that we never said that you can resolve it. All we said is you should look into it. So that was not an acceptable compromise that they wanted to do in that short time frame.
I believe that the applicant's representatives are here as well. Perhaps they can make the presentation of this by sharing a screen and walk you through it. I know none of us are qualified engineers, and Mr. Jacquemart, would you be able to share your screen, or should we have the applicants come on to share the screen? It's a very interesting new plan, and giving a broader understanding of us lay people on, how and where these other parking
Yes,
spaces
let me see if I can find the latest drawing. I think I have to go to the email I got from them on Friday.
There was also an overall decrease in the amount of impervious surfaces. So we should talk about the mathematics in that as well.
Yes. Let me share screen. I think somebody on your side has to. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the 18 space compromise. So in terms of footprint, it's much narrower. You can see this here is a distance of 60 feet. That's the typical layout of a 90-degree parking lot. And before they had a very large circle. And let me see, I may be able to show that to you as well. So here is the original layout. You can see here they had, and this was their first compromise that had 3 spaces here, 1 space there, and 22 spaces here. So that was their first compromise, and has this fairly large circle of 21-foot radius, which we objected to basically because it's a lot of pavement, for these numbers of spaces. So then the new design is much more compact. You see, before they had this kind of area. So in terms of, our compromise is based here on less pavement and more green. That was our major kind of objective, given the overall, restrictions that they set on their side. So at first, the applicant was not very happy about this, and they didn't like the 8.5 feet wide stall. So these stalls are also 8.5 feet wide instead of 9 feet. You would have to give them a waiver if you were to approve this compromise. But you can see it's a much more compact design. It also visually, for a person that's on Broadway on the sidewalk, it's a little bit less, pavement that we had before. And these are the additional spaces they have. So there are 3 more spaces here, 18 spaces there. And this is one of the rows, a very long row, where they would restripe and gain 1 space. And then there are 3 rows in the northerly lot that could be restriped and also generate 3 more spaces total. We did not redesign the row where they have visitor parking. That is also a long row. Because for visitors, it is preferable to maintain a 9-foot wide stall because there are more movements in and out and the people are not that familiar with the lot. So that row for visitor parking stays at 9 feet.
Any
Any
questions?
questions?
Comments?
I think it's great that you guys were able to come up with this plan. I'm really, really happy to see that we worked together on this.
Yeah, it is, as I mentioned before, it is a compromise. If we were not in the Rulipa kind of situation, we probably would have been more aggressive, but we as a firm, we were in a very awkward position in Mamaroneck where we made suggestions to the planning board and zoning board. The zoning board did not accept them, and the day school in Mamaroneck sued them, and it was a very, very negative result for the village of Mamaroneck. Very, very expensive for the taxpayer. So I have to acknowledge, that is part of our, why we felt we should compromise. Obviously, I'm happy that we were able to reduce the footprint. It is a more sustainable solution in regards to what we had before. And you can see here, they show how a vehicle can turn around. A smaller vehicle may be able to make a U-turn. They also felt that they wanted this area for snow storage in wintertime. They don't want to store snow on the grass. So, that was another factor here.
So if I understand though correctly, but for the threat of a suit under the Religious Act, your preferred solution is still the one you presented to us in your original report.
Yes.
And the basis for the applicant not wanting that is they don't want their residents seeing parked cars.
Yes, they feel, and obviously there's some validity to that the residents that are, in a nursing home, they are, at the end of their life, that they feel, they want to maintain a certain quality of, the views that they have when they look out their windows. And obviously it's a subjective argument, the aesthetics tend to be, subjective to some degree. So it's their view of aesthetics versus, the views of the people walking along the sidewalk. So that's where we felt that because of RIPA, one should kind of accept that compromise.
Laura Lee, do you have anything that you want to add to this?
Just that I believe that the applicant is here if there are further questions to ask. I know the representatives were attending today, and I believe there were also some members of the public.
I did have another question. I did have another question, sorry, for Mr.
Great,
Dr.
no problem.
Mark, which I'm sure I butchered, so I apologize. But do you have like an estimate of what your original plausible alternative would have cost to construct?
You mean the alternatives of providing parking spaces along the driveway to the north lot? Our original reaction was it should be less expensive because it involves less pavement, but we have not made, a cost estimate. We're, as a planning firm, we're not good at doing detailed cost estimating, and they haven't done that either. Their attorney at a certain moment, I remember one of the first public hearings that I participated, said that our solution was more expensive than this solution, but we haven't seen that. We have not seen anything to support that.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. Jackmart. My computer died and I dropped off right as you started answering. Could you just repeat it for me? I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
It literally died. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I was saying that in regards to the solutions that we propose, having the smaller parking areas off the driveway that goes to the north lot, it was always my assumption that it would be less expensive because there's less pavement. You just work off the driveway, and but we have not done the cost estimate, and they have not either. And I mentioned that their attorney, and one of the first hearings that we participated in, said that our solution that we proposed, these various lots, was more expensive, but we have not seen that. The engineers have not made the cost estimate, and so I can't say whether it's more expensive or not.
If it turned out that it was less expensive, does that change your viewpoint on this compromise solution?
No, I think in this case, this factor, and it seems that for them it is important that even if it was less expensive, they feel that it is important to maintain the view for the residents as the view is today, more or less green and trees and so on. And it is also a fairly attractive frontage. I don't know if you saw that, they tested our alternatives by parking cars on the grass at those locations where we suggested, they could build smaller parking areas off the driveway. And they feel that's an unacceptable visual impact for their residents. So I think their attitude is that even if it costs a little bit more, they would prefer to do this 18 space lot as it is designed here.
I have an observation.
Excuse me?
Mr. Jacobs, I have a question for you. I know that we have looked into many different alternatives, and as much as I appreciate that they consider a change in their original design, what happened with the idea of utilizing a shuttle to transport the staff in different shifts to other spaces or parking locations within the village? We continue to, I personally continue to try to avoid, actually disrupting the green spaces for the same reasons that you just described, to preserve the green and the views of those residents. Any opportunities in that area of alternative ways in order for us not to even disturb that area with the parking lot?
For an institution like Cabrini, with 3 schedules and so on, and they have 200 parking spaces. It's generally not feasible to operate. I mean, it's feasible, but it's expensive. And if they were to operate a shuttle bus, they would have to operate it over a very long time period, for the main shift, the evening shift. The number of people that would use the bus, would be very low, and it ends up being very expensive. In comparison to Mercy College, they were basically on one shift, and it was a larger number of parking spaces there, a larger number of commuters. It is more feasible. And, and basically Mercy College did not have room on their site to do this. And in this case, they feel they have room on their site. It's a very, it's a small number that we're talking of in terms of, we're talking 25 additional spaces vis-a-vis a total of about, I think they have 200, 198 or 200 spaces today. So operating a shuttle bus would be relatively expensive in terms of the annual operating costs, and not very productive in terms of the number of people that they would carry.
Thank you.
I have another question about the shifts. I understand, obviously, the nursing shift is 24/7, but the office workers, the day programs, the rehab people, is there any way we can get them to use things other than cars to help with the parking problem, or is that not doable?
They have a few people, the survey that they did, they have a few people that carpool and use public transportation. I think mostly the bus, very few coming by train. So today they have a few people, and you may remember we compared it to the census statistics for the people that work in downtown Dobbs Ferry, and they have about the same amount of people using public transportation as the typical person working in downtown Dobbs Ferry. So in that sense, they are typical, and again, because of the, even though, yes, they have a main shift where they have the largest number of people. I can't remember exactly how it breaks down, but it's probably, 60-70% of the total employees work on that main shift. It's still a relatively small number when you look at that in terms of the feasibility. I would say they should look at the feasibility anyway. The geocoding, I don't know, the reaction from their engineer was not, in my view, not very professional. It said geocoding does not reduce traffic. And I said, well, we never said geocoding would reduce traffic. It's a way to look at, whether it's feasible or not. It would not alleviate, the full 25 spaces, even it was feasible. And in addition, with COVID-19, it adds other complications in terms of, sharing a ride and using public transportation and so on. So that adds, another kind of level of complications.
Hopefully the COVID-19 will be temporary.
I hope so, yes, yeah.
Is this new proposed compromise lot the same distance from Broadway as the original one they proposed?
It looks like, and maybe a little bit less, it's basically the same distance, but it's not as wide. You can see how the original design takes up a much wider area compared to the new design. And this one, it does have this kind of open area that would be signed, for a turnaround. I would have preferred to see a hammerhead turn, but they also felt they wanted to have areas where they could store the snow in the wintertime.
Any other questions?
Yes,
Okay, so
what's the approximate, sorry, Vinny, just
Okay.
unmuting myself. What's the approximate amount of surface area reduction from the one plan to this compromised version?
It is, in total, it's a reduction of 1,500 square feet, I think. They measured it, and they'll probably mention it in their presentation. That's the calculation that I saw.
And then was there any discussion about the surface itself? And unfortunately, I can't point to my screen, but for the turnaround area, for example, could it be an alternative surface to asphalt, or was anything like that discussed, or is that even feasible in this kind of application?
I think permeable asphalt is something that should be considered. We did not talk about that, but that's still something that the board could recommend. The opinions are sometimes split on the effectiveness of the. It is effective in the sense that it lets the water through the pavement, but it doesn't resist as well. And maybe in this case, it is an option because it's only 18 spaces, so there's not too much traffic in and out. It's something that I think the board could raise with them to make this new area a permeable asphalt area.
Thank you.
Okay, I know Mr. Palmer has raised his hand, so Jennifer, can you move him to allow him to speak?
Yes. Do you know if he's presenting? Should I promote him to a panelist?
Yeah, you should.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I stop sharing.
Yes.
Yes.
Mayor, you all hear me?
Well, yes, we
And
hear you.
Jennifer and Mr. Mayor, if I may ask that Ralph Perugine also be promoted to a panelist, just because I'm going to defer to him rather quickly, because Mr. Jacquemart went through a lot of materials, but that way we can have Ralph explain, for example, Mr. Patino's question about the square footages. But while we're promoting Ralph, just by way of background, again, Taylor Palmer with the law firm of Cuddy and Fader on behalf of the applicant. I'd like to say good morning, and I could get used to that instead of saying good evening. So we appreciate the special meeting this morning. As I mentioned, I am joined by Ralph Perugine, Provident Design Engineering, our engineer. I'm also joined by Pat Krasnowski, the president and CEO of Cabrini of Westchester, and Carmine Giuliano, also of Cabrini of Westchester. We'd also note for the record, we did submit a proof of service package for today's notice special meeting, and there were also letters of support submitted by the Missionary Sisters of the Sacred Heart of Jesus and the Resident Council of Cabrini. And we understand that we're joined this morning by Sister Catherine Gary of the Missionary Sisters, as well as Sandy Schreier, the liaison to the Resident Council. We again appreciate you calling this special meeting this morning to discuss the 25 parking space as of right program. Before the July 14th meeting, based on discussions with the mayor, the village attorney, Mr. Manley, and the village's parking consultant, at the request of the village, we did go back and our consultant did meet several times, albeit remotely, to discuss additional tweaks. Now, this is not a new application. It's been before this board for over a year. So I should say the village for over a year, and the applicant has made significant compromise. Mr. Jacquemart mentioned it many times. This is a serious compromise. The applicant has an as-of-right parking plan, and we understand and have heard your comments. Significant changes have been made, and I think Ralph will be able to more fully discuss those. But just as a quick highlight in response to some of the comments this morning, we would note that, again, the entrance drive was the parking area south of the entrance drive was reduced from 25 spaces down to 18 parking spaces. And as Mr. Jacquemart was saying, it does appear that the lot was, of course, reduced significantly, and it's actually a 17% reduction in overall paved area. Mr. Jacquemart mentioned 1,500 square feet. It's approximately 1,525 square feet just in the entry drive. So that's in the entry parking lot that was originally proposed. That's the full reduction there. But as we are adding some additional parking spaces elsewhere on the site to reduce the parking area south of the entry drive, the overall reduction is about 1,000 square feet on the the site. And to achieve those reductions, again, we had to restripe some of the parking spaces, which Ralph is going to review, and will require de minimis waiver from this board with respect to the parking widths. And I understand Mr. Manley, who's here, and the village attorney can defer to that, but Mr. Jacquemart did mention that as well. So again, we did hear some comments today, specifically about the alternatives, and Mr. Jacquemart pointed out, and Ralph will show the vehicles parked outside of the residents' windows. Again, the reason why the resident council is the liaison to the resident council is here today is because people that were living and residents that are living and looking out that window commented and said, "What are these cars doing? What are you doing to our view?" Further, you had a parking area in that location previously that became green space for the benefit of those residents. So collectively, those are some considerations here. Understanding, as Mr. Jacquemart mentioned, that many of these residents are at the end of their lives, and that's where they will reside. So at this time, I will ask, understanding that we've gone through a significant presentation, Ralph, to please just address ultimately what our changes are, and we ask that the board consider closing the hearing today, and hopefully this significant compromise addresses your comments to date.
If possible, I'd like to share my screen. I believe I have the various drawings that Mr. Jacquemart was referring to.
You
So
bring
this was the,
sorry, I was just going to ask if you brought a 3D rendering like you did before of the new one.
no, we have not done that on the new one. We have not done that on any of these new projected areas. So this was our first, as Mr. Jacquemart said, this was our first pass at the reduction in the parking. We had added 2 parking spaces by the loading area with a screening fence in between the dumpster that sits here and these spaces. There's an old shed in this corner here, which is going to be removed. So we added 1 more space in there. The slope in this one corner here is probably about 70%, but in general, the parking space itself is less than 5%. So that was the reason why we kind of squeezed 1 space in here. We felt that it was acceptable to put that 1 space as long as the general slope of the parking space was 5% or less. So this was the first drawing we sent to Mr. Jacquemart to start the discussions. This resulted in approximately an 800 square foot reduction overall. We then, and just so you know, this dotted line here represents the design as submitted in this drawing that previously. So then we looked at, and over a couple of passes, we, as Mr. Jacquemart noted, this is the new design with the turnaround area and snow storage areas. These parking spaces in this area are now 8.5 foot wide versus 9, which the code provision. These 2 parking spaces are 9 foot wide. We didn't feel that the 1 foot reduction in here was going to make a significant difference in impervious. So this dotted line here represents the parking where it was as currently designed, as it was previously submitted. So this line is a net reduction in this area alone of 1,525 square feet. Once you add in the impervious from here and here, you're down to, probably, as Ms. Palmer said, approximately 1,000 square foot net reduction overall. So in order to get these additional spaces, we have to restripe the several areas of the parking lot. So in this area here, we maintain this curb line and these 2 curb lines and redistribute the parking to get 24 spaces. The space widths would go from 9 foot 0 inch to 8 foot 7 inch in that area. And then on the north lot, we again redistributed the parking spaces by restriping so that the parking stall width is again further reduced. So to add one space in this area, we went from 9 foot to 8'8". This area here, we went to 8'6.5" by adding one and just redistributing. Same thing in this case. We had 8 foot 6.7 inch. As Mr. Jockmeyer noted, this is the visitor parking area, and redistributing, we did not want to do that. We felt because of the high turnover, it's important to keep those at 9 foot stalls. The stall widths in here, the bay's not long enough in order to add anything here, because you need to have at least 18 parking spaces in a row in order to gain one based on the 8.5 foot dimension. But again, the 8.5 is the minimum that we went with, and that minimum basically exists in the new lot with all the others parking areas slightly over the 8.5. So I know that it was Mr. Jockmeyer mentioned the possible use of permeable paving. Now, permeable paving under the New York State Stormwater Management Code is usually used in conjunction with water quality standards, not stormwater management standards. So the use of permeable paving in the New York State Stormwater Management Manual is restricted to parking only, not to driving aisles. So we don't want to, it's a very small area that the permeable paving would use, and the cost of permeable paving in conjunction with the requirement for 2 feet of stone subbase beneath it is a significant cost factor. You're talking almost 3 times the cost of pavement to install, somewhere between 2 and 3 times. I'm not an exact number, but generally speaking, you're talking a significant cost differential for permeable paving. So we did look at, and Mr. Jockmeyer asked us to look at some, just concept of what the grading would look like in this area. We were able to just do something quickly. Again, this is a concept and would need to be refined by engineering standards. But as you can see, this existing spruce tree that was in this area previously was being removed as part because the grading was impacting the root structure. As you can see now, the grading would be significantly further back from that spruce, and it will remain. So there's the existing spruce that we are removing in the middle of the lot will still be removed. The existing trees along the property line, again, will remain as we had previously noted. For this parking space here, we did some grading in here that might need a little bit of a reinforced slope. By that, we mean it would be a filter fabric of some kind or a soil fabric that would stabilize the slopes, since we made it a little bit steeper than we generally would do in order to protect. I think this is a maple in this corner, and this is another spruce over here. So generally in this corner here, the grading does not impact very much on the existing conditions. However, we did note when we did a field visit last week that although these trees are set back a little bit, 1 or 2 of them in this corner are invasives and should come out. And one of them is also sitting with its root structure exposed, and we would recommend, they're small though. We're talking 4-inch trees, which I believe your code is, I think Ed can confirm it's 6-inch or 8-inch. Ed? Can you confirm?
8-inch requires, permits for removal.
8-inch. So the two that I'm talking about are approximately 4 and 6-inch. So they wouldn't be, and again, they're invasive. So they would, we would take them out just to clean up that corner.
Can I ask a question in reference to the trees that they are on the left-hand side of the parking lot when you're facing Cabrini from Broadway? I see that in here it shows 7 trees. Is that correct?
Here? Are these trees you're referring to?
Yes.
Yes, they're staying.
Okay, I have counted 12 trees in there physically. So why there's only 7 listed here?
Those are the trees that are in the 8-inch or larger as per your code, which are permit requirements. Anything
But that's what
smaller than that does not
No.
require a permit.
They're all pretty, I'm not speaking of anything of that nature. I'm simply speaking in terms that there is actually 12 trees physically in there right now. So why are there only 7 listed in here?
It's just a representation of the cluster of trees. So there may be some other minor ones in between. Like I said, that if they're less than the 8-inch requirement, they wouldn't have been shown on the survey. So there could be clustered in between, but that whole row, as you can see here, whether there may be one additional small one, couple of small ones clustered in here, they're still remaining. We're not touching them. We're touching this whole area is not impacted, the trees in that corner.
And if I may, this is the applicant's
Be clear.
proposal, the 25 parking spaces that were in this location. This is not the original. The original design was a significantly different program. We've changed it. This most recent revision that now only has 18 parking spaces was changed previously in response to site visits with the planning board. So we reduced additional impacts for this parking area before this current design. So we specifically redesigned the parking lot before this current proposal to address maintaining the trees in that area and preserving those trees.
So
Thank
to
you
be
very much.
clear,
Thank you very much. But I was actually on that visit, and I physically counted 12 trees. So Ed, this goes for you. There is 12 trees in there. They are all significantly large. I just want to bring it up that there is 12 trees in that location.
Right. So what I'm going to suggest is that on the plan, they specifically mark with an X every tree that is going to be removed, whether it's below permit requirement or not. Is that acceptable?
We can do that. We just may have to go out and do some measuring, but yeah, we can do that. But the only tree that we're anticipating, again, is the one in the middle of the lot and the 1 or 2 invasives that are in this corner here.
Yeah, you don't have to add the small trees to the plan. Just make sure we mark for removal every tree you plan to remove.
Yep.
Is it possible to put new plantings between the top of the lot and Broadway, or the bottom of the lot and Broadway, whichever way you're calling it?
Well, we originally did propose, and that landscaping plan called for plantings in this area here, as the board had said that they wanted to block the view from Broadway in this direction. So we had plant shrubs and a couple of trees in this corner and the shrubbery that was in this corner. None of that landscaping is changing. We're going to keep it. We'll have to redistribute it based on the current design, but the landscape plan as originally proposed in this area and the shrubbery and that was in this area and a few trees.
So you keep moving your mouse right there. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying that this
Is there
landscape here.
is there landscaping there? I mean, I just don't see it in this drawing, but I know this is a quick.
We haven't had the opportunity to revise that yet. We didn't want to spend time to revise it, but give me a second and I'll see if
Thank
I can
you.
find the most current plan here. I believe it's this one. You can see there is a row of evergreens along the property line and a number of evergreens, a mix of evergreens in this area here to screen this view.
Okay,
And
so it's staying.
So they'll be redistributed a little bit. I mean, this is going to stay. This is going to stay. The only thing that'll end up being redistributed is these 3 trees and maybe a little bit of change because of this change in the corner here. So these shrubs, there might be a minor change but generally speaking, this landscape plan would still be a solution.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for the presentation. If you could stop sharing the screen so I could at least see everybody.
Yep, sorry, apologize.
No, it's quite all right.
Yeah.
So what I'd like, I know, Mr. Palmer, you have other people, but I'm not sure what they would add to this. We acknowledge the important role that Cabrini plays. We acknowledge the fact that a parking lot that Cabrini does have a parking situation and a problem. So having said that, if you want to have one person speak, if you feel it'll be relevant, you can pick that person. That's up to you. The comments should be limited to less than 3 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, we appreciate that opportunity. Again, we have these folks on the line in case you had questions on their correspondence to your board. So there's no need for additional comment unless there is questions for those consultants, but we appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, thank you. What I'd like to do is see if we can get a consensus of the board and how, so we could either close this and move it along, or just if people have more questions or comments. So as usual, Donna, I start with you.
I'm very ambivalent about this. I personally do not feel that they have really done enough to address our issues, except to say they can't do anything. I am appreciative of the fact that we have come to a compromise. It's certainly much better than it was. Again, I am ambivalent. Taking away green space, making it easier for people to bring cars into the village are a big concern for me. But checking with our attorneys and our consultants, the Religious Act might supersede all that. So that's where I'm at.
Trustee Taylor.
I a little bit like Donna. I don't love this. I don't like the idea of paving it, but I do appreciate the work that's been done to try and minimize the impact. I also think it's important that we consider that other alternatives like parking along the entryway, which is one of the things that we recently discussed, that would have a visual impact as well from the road, in addition to from the nursing home. So in my view, this is a reasonable compromise, and I'm supportive.
Trustee Sullivan.
I agree with what Donna and Larry have said to a certain extent. I think that it seems like it's a better compromise than what had been presented and what they were digging their heels on, and taking into consideration the serious concerns we as a village had about the visual impacts. I appreciate the comments about our consultants' proposed plan having a visual impact on their residents as well, because that's a viewpoint we may not have considered. I do want to say again, I think we say this at every single meeting, that the original plan was not an as of right plan, because it's always subject to the Board of Trustees, and Lori Lee will correct me if I'm wrong, but it wasn't as of right that we had to rubber stamp it, but yet the applicant makes that statement at every meeting. I only had the opportunity to really review this briefly before the meeting because of when we received it, and today's presentation has been extremely helpful. I'm not sure where I come out on it, but I appreciate the length of time this has taken, and I think from my perspective, we could close the public hearing while I think about it.
Okay, Trustee Nell.
My main concern with this project was the destruction of the green space, which is part of our vision plan that we're trying to keep it open. But I feel like this compromise is reducing that impact. And I feel like the preferred alternative from our engineer of the front, of using this space in the front of the building isn't necessarily an improvement of destructing open spaces, because it's going to be taking it away from there and making that less of an, like it has a visual impact to the community as it is, as a big open space. So I don't think that the alternative is superior, and they've clearly communicated the need. We've seen it from multiple consultants. So I feel like this compromise solves the problem that they have. It's taking away some green space, but they show that they need it, and it's doing it, as the least amount as possible. So I think that this plan is something that should move forward.
Okay, Trustee DeRossi?
I still don't support the disturbance of the green, not only for our residents, but also for the residents of Cabrini. I do appreciate very much the what I'm seeing right now and the effort that they have put into considering some of the alternatives. That doesn't still have given me enough time to evaluate everything that they have proposed, but it's definitely better than what I have seen before. So thank you
So
for your efforts.
saying you want to think about it? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Trustee Patino?
I am, after hearing the comments about the aisle, the parking space width, I would be in favor of that. I think it's a good solution, a good way to pick up spaces. So thank you for that suggestion, and I think that it goes a long way in helping reduce the size. I think the reduction of 1,500 feet is an important one, and that's 1,500 feet in the area where they were originally planning the parking. I think that goes a long way. And I thank the applicant for explaining the nuance of where and how, the usage of pervious paving, which can sometimes be a much more attractive way to solve parking solutions. And I just, if appearance is important, I urge you to look into that a little bit more for the areas where it can be used. But overall, I think we have come to a reasonable compromise. So I would be in favor of this new parking solution.
Okay, and I also agree with Trustee Taylor's remarks and Trustee Patino. I think it's definitely demonstrated they've definitely demonstrated a definite need for it. I'm not happy with the reduction of all that green space, but I think it's a reasonable compromise in light of what we're faced with. So I'd also be in favor of it. So based upon everyone's feelings, and since we seem to have a consensus of at least 4, I'm going to, unless Laura Lee stops me somehow, I'm going to plan on closing the public hearing and ask her to draft a resolution, which I would, we can talk about the details of some of the things, such as the shrubbery, the greenery, what we would like to be maintained and added. And we could talk about that, but I think there's no point in keeping this open. So
Can I just ask one question before you do anything else, Vinny, so that I have a full record, or what I think is a full record? Like, we talked about the view for the residents of the alternative proposed by Mr. Jacquemart, but to Mr. Palmer, or I can't read that name, sorry, Mr. Peragine, I probably said that wrong, I apologize. How the view is for the residents to the new proposed lot, like, wouldn't that be part of their view too, is seeing that greenery? Well, please answer so we have a clear record. Thanks.
I'm gonna let Ralph put it up on the screen, but just generally speaking, in Ralph's submission, the supplemental submission after the last hearing, we did include, as Mr. Jacquemart mentioned, some visual renderings of what the views are from that area. This area is actually near the employee entrance to Cabrini, so I'll have Ralph clarify, but go ahead, Ralph.
I'm just trying to, give me a second. I'm looking for that document.
There are very different looks, but yes, to your point, Trustee Sullivan, the proposed alternative location was directly outside of about half of the residents' windows at the facility, and then the proposed parking area south of the entry drive is to the front of the entrance rather than outside of the windows. And again, as we mentioned, the alternative parking area was once a parking area and was turned to green space, and then there was St. Cabrini, the statue was put there, and again for the benefit of the residents.
While we're waiting for that rendering.
I'm ready to share if that's okay.
Oh, go.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, Mr. Mayor, do we need, before we close this, to make sure there's no one on from the public who is seeking to make a comment?
we do need that. Do you see anybody, Jen?
Nobody has their hands raised, but if any here, raise your hand. That would be great.
And Mr. Mayor, you did enter that correspondence into the record from the 2 individuals who are standing by to to answer any questions. So that
Yes.
their comments are already in the record, and they were coming by as a courtesy to see if you had questions from them.
Okay, yes, there are, and they are in.
And no one raised their hand either.
One thing I'd like to bring up is Donna's concerns about the demand management and seeing if there's any way that we could be ongoing working with them, or that our sustainability task force could, you know, give them information or somehow be supplying them with information about how their employees could be taking other modes of transportation in a more ongoing fashion. I'm not sure if there's any way of doing something there.
I'm ready to share my screen on those pictures, so. These were the pictures we had submitted from on our last submission, showing the, as we had, Palmer had said, we parked cars out in the front, and you could see how the visual impact of those cars from the green park area in front of the building, the koi pond area, and from several this is from a residence room on the second floor. These two are also, again, from residence rooms up on the second floor. You can see the visual impact as well from there. We also did look at the visual impact from street. If I can find those, give me a second, because I didn't expect to pull those up. So as you're looking from Broadway, walking along Broadway, I'm not sure, can you see the photo of the front entrance here? Anybody?
No, we can't see it.
Okay, let me new share. Okay, there we go. Now?
Yes.
Okay, so we did look along Broadway as well when the subsequent to the parking, to people parking, and as you can see, this is the Cabrini statue in the front here, but as you're walking along Broadway, you can see the front entrance here. And then this is the area looking to the south, to the north along Broadway. You could see where the other parking areas would have been proposed by BFJ in this area would also be visible. And then again, from Broadway, you would see the front entrance visibility. And then the parking that you had seen, which was the cars parked in this area here, can also be seen from Broadway in that area as you're traveling south on Broadway. I was walking, did not step into the street. This photo, again, I did take one from the street. I'm trying to find, here we are. This one's taken from the perspective of a driver driving south, seeing this area here. As you can see, you would still see those parking spaces in the front of the building there. Again, these are just, this was to see that this was one of the areas that BFJ, these two areas here, BFJ had recommended, which would also involve the removal of a nice significant tree here, and the placement of additional parking in here could potentially impact the, whoops, sorry. There's a beautiful existing tree here that if we put parking in this area, we would need a retaining wall to construct.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but that wasn't really my question. My question
I'm
was
sorry.
the view from residents of the new proposed lot.
Well, that's the prior
Thank you, Nicole.
sketch I had shown you, yes.
That's why
I was gonna ask, yeah, what sits in there? What is the
clarify,
view?
The new
Not
lot,
to interrupt, it's
new lot cannot be seen from, you're talking about the lot from where we are.
Rob, I think they're talking about the Broadway view, and they're talking about if you're looking from Cabrini out to the parking area. That's what they're asking about.
Yeah, from the
Am I correct,
residents
Trustee
view.
Sullivan?
Residents view. Yes.
Right.
I'd have to check, but if I'm not mistaken, there are no resident, and I can, Ms. Krasnowski could confirm, But looking towards that area, I don't believe there are any resident windows.
Correct. That's the view of the entrance to the building.
Right. As you're looking towards, all right, I gotta find it.
Are there offices that view that area from the one that we're referring to? There's no residents in that location of the building?
There's only, can you see this view now? This is the Google Maps. Let
No,
me,
Ralph, you're still on your, no.
yeah, let me share this one. Oh, sorry, I'm not used to doing this. This is really, so this is the Google view from the parking on Broadway, the end of the building. And as you can see, the only windows that are viewing the parking lot are in the hallways. There are no resident windows on that face of the building, facing that corner of the parking.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
So, having heard nothing else, is there a motion to close this public hearing?
Denny, I think you were going to check and see if there were any.
Yeah, she did. There's nobody, right?
Okay, sorry.
So you want to take a motion to close the public hearing and authorize council to draft a proposed resolution for your meeting on the 11th. That would be the resolution that would cover all the bases for you.
Okay, is there a motion to close the public hearing and authorize our council to draft a resolution reflecting the majority's view for the August 11th, 2020 meeting? Trustee Nell, second trustee Patino, all in favor? And that passes unanimously. So I want to thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Thank you, everyone from Cabrini. Thank you, Mr. Perugine and Mr. Jacquemart. And we'll put this on for August 11th for a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for holding this special meeting.
You're welcome. Thank you, everybody.
Take care, everybody.
Take a motion to close.
Oh, a motion to close the meeting. Trustee Taylor, second. Trustee Sullivan, all in favor. The meeting is closed. Thank you.
Just to let you all know before you go, the pool passed Board of Health.
Yay. So tomorrow?
Yes, opening tomorrow, training lifeguards today.
Great.
Amazing. Good news.
Fantastic. Great news. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye. Good day.
Thank you, everybody.